it is the end of the work week, a traditional work week anyway. If you work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, the 8-hour workday considered the standard. The pandemic obviously changed things, people working from home, people flexing their hours. Post-pandemic, a variety of return to office policies have maybe changed that a little bit. The flexibility in some ways is still there, but we've kind of returned in many ways to what has been a standard for so long. How did that standard get started? Well, for that, we're going to bring in Peter Rachleff, a retired professor from Macalester College, specializing in labor as well as immigration and African American history. And you're the co-executive director of the Eastside Freedom Library, a nonprofit in St. Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rob. Delighted to be with you.
Tell us more about the Eastside Freedom Library, what its mission is and what people can find there.
Right. So I'm, in fact, no longer the co-executive director.
Okay.
When we talk about the 8-hour day, we might also talk about the concept of retirement. And I'm a bad role model for retirement. I've already retired twice, once from Macalester, secondly from the Eastside Freedom Library.
Okay.
But let's talk about the library, not me. My partner, Beth Cleary, and I started the Eastside Freedom Library in 2014. This is well before Operation Metro Surge, but our concern back in 2014 was that the East Side had changed dramatically over the last 30 years. Industrial jobs had disappeared. And many of the European descended people who had held those jobs had moved away, and immigrants of color from Central America, Southeast Asia, and East Africa had moved into the neighborhood. We live in the neighborhood, have lived here for more than 30 years, and we wanted to create a project that would encourage people to share their stories with each other so that the descendants of Swedish, Irish, German, Serbian, Croatian, Polish, Italian immigrants, that those folks might interact with their new Hmong, Karen, Oromo, Eritrean, Mexican, Salvadoran, Honduran neighbors and explore what they have in common, how their histories, how their experiences overlap, intersect. And something like the 8-hour day is actually a good window into looking at that kind of process of intersection and overlapping.
Yeah, what's interesting here is the labor unions had a big part in,
Yes.
I mean, when you look at the history of labor unions, and certainly they've evolved in many ways in the course of the history of labor unions, but those unions are really responsible for a number of things that became basically enshrined in labor law. Which is, things like the 8-hour day or the 40-hour work week or the amount of vacation you get and the minimum wage and worker protections on the job as well. I mean, tell us about, what this was like before some of these concepts came into being established by the unions and really in labor law. What were the conditions like that led to those massive changes?
Right. So for most of the 19th century and the first third of the 20th century, the boss decided how many hours you would work. The boss decided what you got paid. The boss decided what your job description was. The boss decided what conditions you worked under, safety, danger, and so on. And workers began organizing unions in the period after the American Civil War, trying to establish standards and trying to establish a voice for workers, that they should have a say in negotiating, in bargaining, what their job description should be, how much work they should be expected to do, how long they should be expected to work, and what their compensation might be. And interestingly, it took 50 years for these things to become standard. The battles really begin in the 1870s and 1880s. It's not until the period of the New Deal of the 1930s, when industrial unions begin to be organized from the Iron Range to the meatpacking plants, up and down the state of Minnesota, including the Twin Cities, that workers begin to effectively have that voice and to begin to decide what they think is appropriate in terms of hours, workload, compensation, working conditions. And many of our new immigrant neighbors from other parts of the world have not belonged to unions where they came from. There were not unions in Southeast Asia, in much of Central America, in East Africa. And so they have been experiencing a new process of education, learning what it is to have the right to have a voice, and learning what responsibility to take to make sure that they have that voice, that it doesn't get lost as the workforce turns over, that standards that are established in meatpacking, automobile production, that those standards don't get lost when more of our workforce works in hospitals, and schools and healthcare clinics. Those workers may not be getting dirty at work. They may not be risking injury, but they still have the same challenges of having a voice, having standards, and making sure that their needs are respected.
In an era, and we got to go here in a minute, but in an era now where, again, post-pandemic, where sort of working hours and working weeks are so, there's some flexibility, there's some pushback on that flexibility, et cetera. But still in sort of a labor force, we continue on having shifts, on having hours. I mean, where do you see the future of work headed as we have so many changes in one aspect of it, but maybe still some of those, the shifts, et cetera, on the other side of it? I mean, are we headed towards any changes here in the overall workforce?
Right. I think that there are advocates for shortening the work week. There have been very interesting studies done in the last 2 decades about the increased productivity that workers have, ways that productivity even tends to go up when workers are working fewer hours. They have more energy, more focus. People are reevaluating how they want to spend their time and what's meaningful about their time. And so it's interesting that you want to have this conversation, Rob, you and your colleagues. We're at a time right now where the conversations are beginning again about, well, what about a 35-hour work week? What about a 6-hour day? What about more flex time? What are the ways? None of this is, it wasn't the 11th commandment on the tablets that said thou shalt have an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day. People had to come together and hammer that out. And I think we're on the precipice of another conversation in this society about what is an appropriate work day and an appropriate work week.
And how much does AI take the burden off of some of that? But then again, how much does AI potentially threaten our earning potential too if you're working less? Does that upset the apple cart in terms of economic prosperity for everybody? Continue to be interesting discussions. Thanks so much for taking some time today to talk about
Oh,
this.
thank you. Thank you, and have a good weekend.
Yeah, you as well. Appreciate it.
Thank